Welcome everyone back to another common room.
Hello.
Potentially my first one in a while. When was the last
hmm
time I did a common room?
Yeah, it was a little bit. I think Andrew and I did the last two,
Yeah.
but Andrew is busy doing his homework, so the teachers give him good grades and don't give him lines. So it's just the two of us today.
Yeah. No, I'm excited because we don't actually have anything scheduled for this. And it's fun to just be able to catch up and to dive a little bit more to the personal side of things. And so th- the first thing that I was thinking of that I'm actually just genuinely curious because listeners, it can be interesting. David and I spend honestly probably the most of another individual for me together a week with recording. Yet we don't actually get a chance to chat about life as much because it's amazing when you have so many things you sign on for the recording and then you sign off and all of that. And so, yeah, I want to kick it off, David, with what's something the Lord's been placing on your heart lately, either intellectually, emotionally, new thing you're diving into.
Hmm, that is a tough one. I think it probably all related to parenthood because
Yeah.
Alexander is a goof, and his vocabulary is just exploding at the moment. So we've been teaching him sign language as well as speech, and he is just learning so much. So he is, more.
Uh huh. Is this all done or something?
Yep, all done, finished.
Yep.
Uh, yeah, it was funny. We actually had we have a family dinner every Sunday, and that's our extended family. So most of my wife's family lives here, immediate family, so her siblings and their families, as well as some aunts and uncles that have moved. So we have a big family dinner every Sunday, and it's kind of fun because I can, Alexander's got lots of tricks at the moment. So if I say to him, Alexander, are you a man? He goes,
No way.
yeah. I told him to do that. I'm really proud of that. But I can ask him lots of questions, and he can tell me about his day. It's like, where did you go today? Did you go to mass? And he goes, mass.
Oh.
Um, yeah, and whenever he sees Jesus, he goes, "Owie, owie," because he sees him either on the cross or like a pietà,
Mm.
and so we've had to spend some time convincing him that Jesus is okay. Uh, but yeah, so just with Alexander's communication skills sort of going through the roof at the moment, it's really wonderful connecting with my son more and starting to discover more of
Mm.
his personality. And between that and my upcoming trip to Chicago, which was happening Thursday this week, uh, I the thought of leaving him is just horrible. And so all of these parental experiences, delight in seeing my son come alive, um,
Mm.
you know, reaching more of his potential, and the thought of being without him, it really makes me think of this is probably one of the better analogies as to how we relate to God, God's
Yeah.
desire for us, um, and wanting the best for us, even if sometimes we have to go through some hard things. Because even just things like learning to walk and learning to eat your food and do all of the things that grown-ups take for granted, he sort of stumbles his way through, and sometimes I have to just hold back a little bit and let him work it out for himself, um, as well as just wanting him to be with me all of the time, as well
There's
as when he's having a tantrum, because he is going to be 2 in September, and he has his occasional meltdowns when he wants to go ow ow. He wants to go and play in the garden, and no, it's time for bed, or I'm just tired, or it's wet or raining or snow, and he will just have a meltdown, and he doesn't understand that I want the very best for him, but this isn't it for
Mhm.
him, and he fights me every step of the way. And the same thing when I'm trying to put him to sleep. He wants to stay up and do things, even though he's far too tired, and I'm just trying to encourage him to lean into me, just relax, just be with dad. If you fall asleep, that's great, because that'll be the best thing for you. And he fights me every step of the way.
Well, okay. There's about 10 different directions I want to take this, but I'm going to stick down this path and let you go a little bit further with this. Now, Now that you're seeing this more in real time, you in the father's shoes, much more. If you could look back now, back to when you were 22, 25, 30, 35, what are some things you would have done differently? Or any examples of things where you're like, man, if I just understood this worldview more, or I could see, maybe let me rephrase this, if I could only see the way God saw me, which I now understand much more, or you understand much more, I would have just operated so differently. Like, how were you obstinate, throwing a temper tantrum, all this stuff, not trusting, maybe?
In lots of different ways. I can't think of anything in particular.
David's like, I never threw temper
Because I was
tantrums.
kind of great.
I was obedient.
No, I can't think of anything in particular that I would have done differently, although perhaps had a better awareness of in those moments when you're in prayer and you're taking one half of the Psalms. You know the Psalms where the psalmist is complaining to God about how everything's unfair. I think it might give me a little bit more of a pause for thought that I might be throwing a tantrum just like my son. But I would actually say it's the bigger thing, and where I thought you were going when you started to ask that question. I would treat my dad with a little bit more grace. My dad and I, we had a strange relationship, but there is definitely something about being a father when you realize just how little you know and how you are mostly muddling your way through. When I put Alexander to bed each night, the last thing I do is just pray a quick blessing over him, and my prayer ends with, "And Lord, please compensate for my failures as a father," because I can't describe how helpless you feel at times as a parent when, say, something's wrong with your child and you can't do anything, even if it's something as comparatively minor as a cold. When Alexander has a cold, he doesn't feel well, he doesn't sleep well, and I would do anything I could to try and fix that. And other than there's this gross little nose thing that you can use to suck the boogers out. And
the Navage? No. Have you heard about that?
No.
That's like the new craze.
Okay, this is called a nose frida.
Water through your nose.
Oh, gross.
It's not really for babies; it's for adults, I think.
Yeah, it's the thing that Dwight does with the teapot in the office. But yeah, I think.
Have you ever read? Real quick, have you ever read "Telling Secrets" by Frederick Buechner?
No. I have actually never read any of his books. I just have a handful of quotations that I use in talks repeatedly.
I used a good bit from there because he talks about how when you go into that deepest, darkest spot of yourself at your core is when you meet God one-on-one. And I put that in a talk that I pretty much sprinkled together, Henry Nouwen and Frederick Buechner. Mm-hmm. And anyways, in his book, Telling Secrets, he has a daughter that was really struggling from anorexia to the point of hospitalization and near death on multiple occasions. And it was a really profound reflection on the helplessness as a father in that situation because of free will, essentially. Like there's only so much he could do in that journey and how painful it was. And then he kind of, a lot of what you're talking about, connected it to probably how God feels with us when we have our own sicknesses of sin, a little bit different than that situation for sure. But, and he just feels helpless because all he can do is woo us and call us and pursue us. But ultimately we have to turn to him. It's a good book. You should read it.
Yeah, I'll add it to my list. At the moment, I'm just finishing up this little number, a Hebraic Inkling. It's about
there we go. It's a little blurry.
Lewis's relationship with Judaism. This is actually another one. Sorry, I was turning into David's book hour. I'm working on this, the Inkwell Chronicles. It is absolutely wonderful. Marie read it first. It got sent to me by the author or the publisher. And then my wife got to it first. Alexander loves the cover, and I've now been instructed that I definitely need to read that as well.
I like it. Well, going back to the father thing, the other thing I was going to say is, have you ever read Return of the Prodigal Son by Henry Nouwen?
Nope. Seen the picture. Actually, or have I? Hang on. Actually, no, I might have read that one. Okay. Yes, actually, no, I did read that. I went through a brief Henry Nouwen's phase, and I just read all of the books that were on my mother's bookshelf because she had quite a few of them.
Like Life of the Beloved.
I think it was Wounded Healer,
Yep,
Return of
that's
the
a good one.
Prodigal Son, and there was another
Way to
one that was
Heart,
more of like
Centering Prayer
an
one.
anthology. The other one was just an
Okay.
anthology.
So, well, in the Return of the Prodigal Son, he has this moment. It sounds like one that you similarly had. Different thing brought him to the moment, but when he had a tough relationship with his father, and there's a really key moment in the book when I think he's on a near death experience. It was either him or his father, but I believe it was him. And he just had this realization in this moment that I need to learn to love my father for the imperfect human he was. Like he
Mm.
understood his imperfection, and then he understood his father's imperfection. And there's a great temptation, and honestly not temptation, desire. And it's probably good desire, but to think of your parents as perfect or want them to be perfect or expect them to be perfect. And that probably comes from childhood. And then there's like that whole period when they're not, and that leads to so much anger and resentment and bitterness and not realizing they have their own struggles, wounds, fears, insecurities, all this stuff. And it was just a great realization for him. And then that ultimately ended up healing his relationship with his father, but then helping his relationship with the heavenly father, because the parental relationship definitely impacts the heavenly one.
Yeah, I think I've spoken about it at some point during the podcast that I had a very similar dynamic happen in my own life when I went to Thésée on retreat. So this ecumenical monastery in the center of France, where I had a few days of wonderful prayer, and then suddenly just was like hitting a brick wall, and I realized that my relationship with my earthly father was impacting my relationship with my heavenly father, and I needed to get my heart right with one and therefore the other.
Mine, I had the exact, I never knew that. Maybe you've mentioned it and it just went over my head.
What's my daughter's name?
Lucy.
Yeah, we go.
That was taking way too long.
Just making sure you're paying attention.
Yeah, I have so many kids that are having kids, or friends that are having kids. I now it's terrible. I shouldn't say this if in case any of my friends, but if they have multiple ones, it's like, so how are the little ones? That's like if I don't remember their names. Um, but I had something similar at in San Diego before I came back to the Catholic Church. I was going to a non-denominational C3 San Diego. They're massive now, but at the time they were in the earlier stages, and they gave a very similar. Well, I don't know what talk it was, but something about the relationship with the parents, and that I came across that talk at the exact same time when I was reading Henry Now and Return of the Prodigal Son. I had the exact same moment because this was the first year out in San Diego. I had a really tough experience with my parents after college, in college, and then to right after. And yeah, I guess the short answer of that, I was going to think how deep to go, but yeah, the short answer was I called them on my way home at like 9 p.m. and they were sleeping because of 3 hour time change, but I left a voicemail telling them I love them. And I remember it being a scary moment. I actually think the next morning my parents asked, is everything okay? Because if you like in a bad sense, I was like, it almost led to like laughter and humor, but it broke the ice. In terms of some tension, I'm like, yes, everything's okay. This isn't a darker call. And so, anyways, yeah, it's a very important thing, I guess, is the conclusion of all this, is just to understand that the relationship with your parents is incredibly important and impactful of the way you view your father. I've heard about that actually from attachment theory. Yeah, that's
And
cool that you've been able to experience that with a child, to open that up to you.
yeah, it's brought new attention to St. Paul's words. I think it's in Ephesians, where he says, "And therefore I kneel before the Father, from whom all fatherhood takes its name." Basically, my fatherhood is a participation, a pale imitation of God's fatherhood. Sometimes that it's more pale and less participatory than it really should. But yeah, I will definitely say becoming a father makes you feel very small, and you discover some very clear limits to your abilities.
I'm curious your thoughts. This is going to be related, but now we're going to get lighter because
Whew.
I came across a tweet this morning, that went viral to the point of Jordan Peterson engaging it and Ben Shapiro engaging it. So this gentleman tweets out, he's starting to gain some success. I think he's maybe 30. So just shy of my age. And he goes, hot, unpopular take. Don't worry about love in your 20s. Focus on advancing your career. And then you can figure that out later. And as you can imagine, and probably rightfully so, everyone sort of dragged him through the mud. Like this one beautiful Catholic individual actually put a tweet of his family and said, I got married at 26. I got 6 beautiful kids. If I could have got married at 18 and had started my family, I would have. The point that they're all trying to do on like the opposite end of the spectrum was the beauty of family over career and that side of it. But I'm a little bit curious your reaction or take to something like that, because you were later in life getting married, but not necessarily because you're focusing on your career. I'm on that path as we speak. Andrew went down that path. I read that. I would admit, I read that and it hit me a little bit. I got like internally slightly emotional because of actually the beautiful people that were talking about how much they love their families. So like the people that were obviously replying to them. And I was more in the camp of course, if I could have met the love of my life, I would have done this at 28. I would have done this at 26. Uh-oh. It says Riverside can't access my video. Oh, okay. There we go.
We're back.
My thing stopped. We're back. Sorry, guys. Uh-oh. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
All right. We'll just keep talking then. My thing is turning off and on right now. Well, I'll let you speak to this then, because my video is turning on and off right now. So you go.
I think broadly I would respond in the same way that most other people did. I think there are an awful lot of reasons why having children younger is probably better. I actually had a moment just yesterday when I was playing with Alexander on the trampoline, which he absolutely loves. His favorite game is horse. Basically, he rides me like a horsey until he falls off. But I had a sort of a moment of sadness when I realized that because I am an older father, I'm not old, but I'm older, I get less time with him. As he's growing up. And that was quite a melancholy moment. And so, yeah, I think by and large, I would certainly have preferred to have got married younger and started having kids when I was younger. I will play devil's advocate and say there are certainly some advantages to doing this a little bit later in life. You're more financially stable. I was able to buy our forever home pretty much as soon as we needed it. So we have plenty of room for any of the other children that we have, and to open up for the family, and we don't have to worry about money, and all of those sorts of things. Plus, you do get a little bit more wisdom the more gray hairs that you get. But yeah, it just seems very, I don't know if I quite want to say shallow, but it's like first things first. What's more important in life? Building up your business or having relationships with people that love you? I don't think that's really a very serious competition. Now, one of the flip side, yet again, I will say, my career in my 20s, I certainly put a lot of work into it. I don't think to the detriment of anything else. I wasn't working crazy hours. I never have. I don't think I've ever worked more than, apart from, say, at a massive deployment, I don't think I've ever really worked more than about 45 hours a week. But my career certainly did get more focus. It wasn't distracted with family life and, going and writing code after having, half a night's worth of sleep because one of the kids has had croup, and still have the contents of a diaper underneath my fingernails.
It makes a huge difference, by the way. Coding when you're tired.
Oh,
rough.
True. And so I think that there is an argument to be made for work hard in your early years, in your 20s in particular, because you do have the luxury of that kind of focus. But I think for me, where that tweet sort of falls down is it's looked at it as a binary, as well as I'm going to do this first and then I'll do that other stuff later. That other stuff might not come. So if you are only focusing on building your business, building your career, it might be to the detriment. You might be basically putting yourself out of the market for the other things in life. And I was fortunate enough that, I had a beautiful woman want to go on a date with me when I was an old man. But yeah, I can see why that tweet got such hot reactions.
Yeah, I almost responded. I don't respond on Twitter much. I think once or twice I have, and I'll see you get in a conversation on Pints with Jack, and I wanted to get involved in one of them, and I sent a few tweets to some person that was just bugging me. And then there's a lot of times where I actually type a response and I set it. I just end up typing a response and then discarding it. And so I did that with this one because I kind of said to the person, not in a trigger type of way, just in a genuine, because he actually did ask later, why is this leading to this kind of response? I was going to point out probably phrasing. I think if you rephrase it as, you continue to always have an openness to love. If that comes at 22, 26, 30, 32, 36, then you do what you did. Until that comes, you're taking advantage of that time to be intentional with your spiritual life, with your career life, to put yourself in a better position for when that moment comes, which could be at 22, could be at 32. Then I think there's nothing wrong with that. And so you almost rephrase it as, maybe look at it as there is a benefit to, if you happen to be somewhere where it comes a little bit later and you've pointed out some of the benefits. I wouldn't say those trump where it's like, seek that out, force yourself to wait, because it's best to have those things in place. The right spouse, you want to do life together. I will say, I don't know if you experienced this. I'm worried about this. As time has gone on, and particularly because of running a business, I have become much more routine oriented. It allows me to honestly maintain mental sanity in the face of stress sometimes. And so I've just gotten more stuck in my ways. I'm slightly worried the longer time goes on, the harder it will be to mold to another individual. At 22, 24 would have been way easier. So there's the benefit of I financially, I know myself more as well, identity, stronger in the faith, wisdom, that stuff. The negative is I'm very stuck in my identity. My wisdom is probably not changing, hopefully. So anyways, that is something that crosses my mind. I'm like, oh, this is going to get tougher and tougher every year that goes by.
Yeah, I would affirm your point about it was the way that he said it and what it sort of implies. That's sort of really where the problem is. There was actually a talk that I used to give back pre-COVID when I actually used to go and talk to people, and it was called "Is There Life Before Marriage?" And the essential thrust of that talk, I was trying to speak to the Christians who really, really want to get married. No, not myself. I was totally happy. But I was trying to speak to those people who are fretting. They want to be married now, and it was basically an exhortation not to waste that time in the meantime, to get on and build the kingdom, get on and build virtue, get on and get into places where you might find that spouse, rather than just simply waiting at home and expecting that person just to turn up at your door saying, "Hi, God sent me."
And I would say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, because you have more experience than me, having gone from the singlehood to the married life and having a longer singlehood period.
Being old, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Out of all of those things, if you had to just focus on one, of course, I think focus on all, like your whole integrated self, from the professional to personal, spiritual. But if you had to put it in one word, or two words, build virtue. Mm-hmm. I've seen myself oscillate. There's been seasons where I'm much higher in virtue and seasons I'm much lower. And I think I've had the realization it's only when you're, it's just, I can't believe I'm saying I had this realization, because of course this is obvious. They have that whole halt, hungry, alone, lonely, tired, or whatever, like your triggers essentially. But when you come home, you're exhausted. You've had a bad night of sleep. You're on a few cups of coffee. You had a couple things go wrong at work. I'll come home and my temptation towards vice and away from virtue is far greater. Now imagine you come home and you've got a house with maybe your kids are now having a meltdown too. It's like, if you can't do it in the regular, like that's your moment to like weightlift. Honestly, I mean that spiritually weightlift the virtuous muscles, because it will make it 10 times easier. I'm assuming, if you have done that properly, because it's only going to be tougher when you are married, most likely.
Yeah, die before you die. Yes, die before you die. If you can't do the tough stuff while you're single, marriage is going to be quite a boot camp, and particularly when kids turn up. And I did want to mention your worry about being set in your ways. Yes, worry about that. That is a really, really good point. I've got quite a few of my friends who have got married later in life, and I think the ones, by and large, certainly not all, but by and large, the ones that handled it better were the ones that say still had roommates, that they still had to work in a team where there was plenty of give and take. Basically, they were used to being inconvenienced and having to serve other people. And yep, routines are beautiful, but again, these are things that require some adaptation when you have a wife, and certainly when you have kids. I wanted to work out in the morning. I couldn't do it. Alexander got up early. In fact, he got up far earlier than I'd intended to get up anyway. So it's like, all right, well, that's that plan gone. We're going to have to adapt and overcome. So
what's interesting that you say that too is you obviously were fortunate you had roommates, and so you were probably a little bit more prepared for that than myself.
Well, but I'm actually gonna
doubt.
I will say it was the hardest thing when Marie and I started dating, adapting, because I'd also been single for I think 2 years by that point. I'd gone on the odd date, but I'd returned to San Diego, and I was now very much set in my ways after having my heart broken
for like 5 years. Beyond, like, if you use the definition of more than a month, I've had like 3-4 week thing, but yeah.
Well, adapting to being available for somebody else, just in terms of time, was difficult. I mentioned when we were going through Screw Tape, the bit in Screw Tape I really hate is when Screw Tape says what you want to do is inculcate in your man the idea that the 24 hours that he's given are his own. He is entitled to them. And anyone who's asking to take anything away from them is like theft. That was my date. That was my dating with Marie. It was really trying to get out of that mindset.
Yeah, because I literally, I listen to the Huberman podcast, and I love to, I probably a side passion of mine outside of my Catholic faith and theology conversations is like the optimization of life, your dopamine optimization, your sleep optimization, your diet, exercise, sun exposure, all this stuff. Like I actually do kind of nerd out to that. Taking cold showers in the morning. How do I optimize just my energy levels? Which is just going to get thrown out the window with kids. And I do recognize that, but I look at it as I might as well still take advantage of it now if it can help me a bit in some areas. But like you also could argue, it's best just to get used to not optimize life. But
I think it's fine to do, but you've just got to hold on to it very lightly. Because particularly when you have a spouse and children, you then have periods of time that Matthew Kelly, he calls it quality timelessness. It's basically where you're just with each other. You're just goofing around together. You're just spending time together. There isn't anything that we're going to quite achieve during this time together.
I will say this. I do pride myself in this. I'm very fine with deviating from my routine. So like I'm a big believer that routine allows you like freedom to some degree. So I eat healthy, but then when I'm traveling or when I have just feeling lazy at night and I go get a pizza or something, I don't get like anxiety out of that. Like, oh my gosh, my routine is deviating. This is the worst thing in the world. So I'm hoping that will help me to my advantage.
But don't suggest that you stay out beyond 8:30 at night.
Yeah, no. That won't deviate from that routine.
There are limits.
I can't do that. The amount of times I leave at 8:30 places, actually more like 8, so I can wind down, is unreal. But where I was going with the comment earlier was, I will say this. I've noticed this as a co-host, and Andrew probably has too. You obviously are much more of a structured type of individual and have your ways and preferences. And that's why we have the joke Batesian. That's why we have the joke Batesian rigidity. And we still joke about it today. But your like flexibility since you've been married has gone through the roof. Like if I think through 2018, 2019 years in my interactions versus 2022, 2023, David, I'm like, dang, because we were both two just strong-willed, stuck in our way individuals. And
Mm-hmm.
now I'm like, man, David, I mean, it's really Batesian flexibility.
Well,
Like
exactly.
Andrew and I mean, we both, whenever we need to reschedule, you are just like the most flexible individual with anything. I'm like, dang. And ironically, you're the one that arguably has the least flexible thing with a child.
Yeah. The only
So,
thing that
anyways,
can't really
props to
move is
you.
bedtimes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's where a long way of saying I think the marriage thing, like you said, forces you out of that. And I have seen it firsthand with yourself. And now I'm waiting for my purgatory where that comes for me.
To your crucible of love. Cheers.
Cheers. That was fun. See, I like just coming in with nothing.